Chapter 1. Hey, how about a political marriage? Part 2. The Gilet mine is one of the top gold deposits on the entire continent, but its yields have been primarily circulated only in the West until now. I'm certain you're aware of this, Your Highness. Tyr dove right in at the start of the meeting. To think that an ally is currently in possession of the mine. It can be nothing but an act of divine aid. The demand for gold is extremely high in our empire. I strongly urge that you sell us your supply, he continued forcefully. It was as if his speech was the embodiment of enthusiasm and fervor. And that observation was correct. For Tyr Talem, the imperial ambassador currently stationed in Natra, this meeting with the crown prince was of utmost importance. He had served as a foreign diplomat for the empire for over 15 years and, to be frank, an unremarkable one at that. After all, he'd been born a commoner, and even Tyr himself couldn't exactly claim that he was particularly competent. That's why he'd filled in at short-staffed national embassies, performing routine duties and accompanying the regional ambassador on this or that trip. And when Tyr was done with his tasks, he'd be switched over to another embassy and repeat the process all over again. All the while, there were scores of people both younger and smarter than him who'd been promoted through the ranks in the empire, which prided itself on its meritocracy. Tyr had felt ashamed about it more than once or twice. But an unexpected chance had befallen him. After his predecessor lost her position, he had been selected to fill in for Ambassador Fish Blundell. Of course, the biggest reason for his deployment was that the empire could hardly afford to lose its most competent workers to positions overseas, considering the instability of their current state of affairs. His superiors had ordered him not to say anything more than was strictly necessary. But I can't just follow their instructions this time. Once the storm of internal conflict passed through the empire, Tyr was destined to be dismissed from his duties, and another would take his place. If he couldn't leave behind his mark, he'd be plopped right back into his fixed position as a stand-in. Tyr was already in his 40s, and he was reaching the age when it was starting to get more difficult to travel the world constantly. Plus, he had a family back in his home country. He was lucky if he could see them once a year. I've got to show them what I can do and secure a position based back in the homeland. For my family. Tyr had been spurred on by his personal circumstances as he proceeded to the royal palace in the kingdom of Natra to meet Wine. There's nothing wrong with being motivated, whatever the reason for it. The problem, however, was that his work was in realm of international diplomacy. Now, don't get yourself all riled up. Wine could read his opponent's thoughts all too well, not that it required much effort on his part, since it was obvious from Tyr's eyes boring into his jugular. You're asking for it if you're going to show your hand that quickly. International diplomacy was about haggling for the profit of one's country. And considering how the effects of a success or failure could ripple across thousands, or tens of thousands of people, even the most inconsequential information had to be handled with the utmost care. But Tyr had already revealed his demands, which meant the other party could dig into the circumstances and background that steered these requests, as well as the future actions to follow. Basically, it gave Wine more than enough information to strategize. And the empire didn't need to make any demands about affairs concerning the mine if they took the situation in Natra into account. Natra had weak relations with the West, and they shared their eastern border with the empire. As long as the empire didn't lowball them, Natra would have eventually approached them about making a deal as a matter of course. But he wants me to hurry up and seal the deal. I've heard rumors that he wants to return to his country. Seems he needs to make his mark. And fast, Wine calmly analyzed. I appreciate your proposal, Ambassador. Gold may captivate us with its glitter and glitz, but it isn't enough to illuminate our dark winters or offer us respite. I'd much rather turn it into something that can help my people directly. In that case, however, Tyr looked as if he was ready to bite, but Wine stopped him. I think you've heard about our difficult battle against Martin. In terms of damages, we suffered more than casualties. The truth is, since the Gilet mine was our primary battlefield, it has lost most of its functionality. This wasn't a lie. They really had collapsed a number of tunnels in order to win. The transportation roads and miners' houses had also been destroyed, and restoration was still ongoing. Thanks to that, the mining conditions are less than ideal, and all operations have come to a halt. It's hard to say how much we'll excavate once everything is up and running. Which means it's hard for me to make a deal right now. Okay, this may have contained a white lie. They had restarted mining operations alongside the repairs. And they'd already estimated the expected output and income of the mine, which meant Wine had more than enough information to hammer out the initial outline of a deal, even if he couldn't close it right away. If that were the case, why did he lie? Well, Wine knew that securing this deal would be considered a huge win for the ambassador. It was important to hold out for someone with the potential to establish a favorable, long-term connection with Natra instead. An appointed ambassador acted as a direct channel to other nations. Plus, there was no guarantee that there would ever be as great an opportunity to strengthen their bond with the Empire in the future. That made Wine hesitant to agree to a deal with a worthless ambassador who could be let go at a moment's notice. If Ambassador Blundell were here, I would have talked about handing it over, with some bonuses in exchange for us, of course, but I'm not so sure about this guy. Tyrd would have exploded into a fit of rage if he could have heard Wine's thoughts. But at the negotiating table, the substantial years Tyrd had on Wine wouldn't level the playing field. It all came down to talent. Well then, Your Highness. When will you have a better idea about when you'll resume operations at the mine? Hard to say. It's a critical asset to our nation, and we're planning to construct a flawless system, which takes time. But hey, no need to worry. I know it's important for us to maintain ties. Once the mine is up and running, I plan on bringing up our deal again right away. Wine dodged Tyrd's attempt to hound him and offered a small smile. The meeting continued to proceed with the ambassador trying to find an inn and Wine remaining evasive while promising nothing. At last, Tyrd slumped his shoulders dejectedly. He doesn't seem to have much else to offer. I'll just let this conversation die out. The last hand marked an end to the game. There was nothing left here for either of them, even if the conversation dragged on. Could it be you're not feeling well? I know it's earlier than planned, but we can wrap up. No, I'm perfectly fine. Tyrd adjusted his posture, realizing his despondency was showing. It's just that I'm impressed by your insight, especially considering your young age. Wine chuckled. I'm embarrassed to hear that coming from a talented official of the Empire. I'm still learning the ropes, but I do try and put on a bold front. Learning the ropes, huh? I've encountered any number of royals throughout my career, but I sense a clarity in you that's no less than the ruler of any other nation. Isn't that an awful lot of praise to be laying on an unmarried youngster, Ambassador Talem? Wine responded casually, flashing him a wry smile. Tyrd's eyes suddenly widened. Come to think of it, are you betrothed, Your Highness? Well. The vassals are apparently searching for candidates, but I don't have a ring set aside for anyone yet. Wine's shoulders shrugged. If I became smitten with a commoner, I'd go down in history, but when I close my eyes, all I see are mountains of paperwork. I see. Tyrd nodded and flashed a sliver of a smile, his face marked with deliberation. Marriage is a fine thing, Your Highness. It makes life all the richer. But they say there can be no fortune without misfortune, don't they? A spouse will stick with you, even in those hard times. I see. When you put it like that, it doesn't sound bad at all. Wine and Tyrd talked for a while longer until it was time for their first meeting to draw to a close. No new ties had been formed between the two nations. It was nothing more than the young crown prince and the new ambassador introducing themselves to each other. Based on the outcome, that was all anyone would assume had happened. But something unexpected had transpired. Despite the undesirable outcome, Tyrd's face was not marred by disappointment, but instead lit up by a shining beacon of hope. The gold mine may not have worked out, but there's potential here. As he formulated a plan in his mind, the ambassador briskly exited the palace. Wine stared out the window as he watched Tyrd leave. Ninim piped up beside him. And? Is it okay to just leave that be? Huh. Ambassador Talem. Didn't you notice? Ninim spoke with slight distaste. He plans on finding a bride for you in the Empire. Seems that way. That was Tyrd's last-minute plan. From the perspective of an outsider, Wine was a young, mild-mannered crown prince overflowing with wisdom and, most importantly, he was single. For the girls and women of the world, he was a rare find. If Tyrd introduced him to the woman who would become his princess, the ambassador would stand tall in the eyes of his superiors. It may have been a last-ditch effort, but that was pretty gutsy. Wine gave a wry smile. There were none more terrifying than Wine and Ninim. The duo had not only seen through Tyrd's plans, but already took his next moves into account as well. Well, it won't exactly be easy for him to pull off. Right, Ninim? Yes. If he's going to introduce a girl to foreign royalty, commoners are out of the question. The daughter of a baron or viscount wouldn't be proper either. He'd want a daughter of an earl at the very least, but I don't think the ambassador has any appropriate connections for that. Plus, even though the empire's laws allow left-hand marriages, the nobility would need the approval of the emperor to join a royal family in another country. With their country's throne empty, there's not much they can do. It wasn't rare for marriages among noble families to come laden with restrictions, especially when it came to unions with influential foreigners. These had the potential to throw off the internal power balance or invite other nations to meddle with their affairs, which meant most nations remained vigilant against these marriages. However, the empire was on the lenient side in making allowances. There were some kingdoms in the West with strict social hierarchies that entirely forbade marriage to foreigners and between people of unequal social rank, like those between commoners and nobles. Only unions equal to one's bloodline were acceptable. It may be extremely unlikely, but it's still possible. The ambassador may know people with enough political clout to push it past the empty throne. Yeah, but would someone with that amount of power go out of their way to pester the royal family? Especially when the empire is in shambles. If they've got a girl of marrying age, my guess is that the family will want to prioritize domestic relationships first. Maybe they're ready to call it quits with the empire. Not a chance. It would be a possibility if they were on the verge of dissolving. The empire might split up, but it's far from completely sinking. It's too soon to say they're closing up shop. Wine paused and grinned. In other words, I'm not going to marry anyone from the empire. So cheer up. I'm not upset. Liar, liar, pants on fire. You're totally pissed at me. Ninim, you're so cute when you're blushiow wow. I've been thinking for a while now that I could probably add a few more joints to your arm. No. Please. I only need one. Capped at my elbow. Ninim let go of Wine's arm indignantly. I wasn't blushing. I know. Forgive me. You weren't blushing and you weren't in a sour mood. You're the same standout cutie and super beautiful chick as always. Are we good now? Yes. Seriously. After shuddering slightly as Ninim gave a satisfied nod, Wine pulled himself together. In any case, it'll be impossible for the ambassador to find someone worthy of my station, and even if he does, I'm not planning to accept any proposals, including nobles in Natra. Ninim's eyes slightly widened at this. It would make sense to avoid getting tangled up in the current tumultuous state of the empire. But what could possibly motivate him to refuse getting betrothed to one of his own people? It hit Ninim hard. Wine, could it be, she asked with a trembling voice, that you're interested in men? I'm going to squeeze your boobs. Each squeeze will cost 1 finger. Miss Standout Cutie, don't you think that's a hefty price to pay? Tell me your reason, and I'll give you a discount. What a bad business practice. Wine answered. It's really not that complicated, you know? I mean, basically, I'm gonna sell out the country the minute I get the chance anyway. Ninim put her hand over her eyes. From the perspective of a hopeful bride, they'll be coming here with the expectation of becoming the queen to a future king. But those dreams would be totally obliterated. I'd feel bad. If you're able to have any sympathy at all, I'd say you should put a hard stop at committing treason. Nope, it's definitely happening. My heart is set on tossing away duty and responsibility and enjoying a life of leisure. I see. I've answered your question. And? How much do your boobs cost now? 2 fingers. Are you seriously jacking up the price? Ninim gave an exaggerated sigh. Honestly, I think I'd rather pray the ambassador brings along someone you can't refuse. Good luck finding her. Want to bet on it? All right. If I win, I'll shove a boiled potato up your nose. Oh, now we're talking. You haven't got a chance. With the challenge on, Wine let out a laugh. I've done it. Huh. A few weeks had passed since their first meeting. At the very start of their second interaction, that was the first thing out of Tiered's mouth. "Done what?" Wine asked nervously. Tiered replied with some hesitation. "It may have been presumptuous of me. Upon hearing that you were a bachelor, I searched far and wide in the Empire for a suitable prospect to strengthen the bond between our nations." "I see, yes, that. I would have appreciated a warning. My apologies. I couldn't say for certain whether I would be able to find a suitable girl, you see." Tiered had a point. If he'd failed to deliver, he would have lost face. And he really couldn't have taken that risk during their last meeting. Because Wine understood this, he didn't press the issue. Besides, he had other problems. "I understand. Let's just move on. You're saying you found her?" "I did." Wine indirectly looked at Ninim, who was standing by him as his aide. She was smiling brightly. It was a grin of someone totally prepared to shove a potato up his nose. "I'll shut this thing down if it's the last thing I do," he thought. "First of all, Ambassador Talem, allow me to offer my thanks. After all, you did go to great pains for my benefit. But I am a member of the royal family. I don't know who you found, but the criteria for choosing the future queen are strict," Wine warned. Tiered nodded with zero hesitation. "I am aware of this, of course. And there are no problems in that regard." Wine considered Tiered's behavior. The ambassador must have been confident that Wine and this girl he found would fall in love at first sight if he was insisting that there would be no problems. But something was off. If Tiered had been acting as he had in the last meeting, it wouldn't have seemed strange for him to be worked up. But why was he so fidgety this time? "I'm guessing she checks all the boxes, but comes with a complication. Maybe?" he speculated as he spoke up. "Ambassador Talem, you seem restless. Could it be there's something about this candidate that I should be concerned about?" "And no, absolutely nothing of the sort." Tiered's voice rose in a panic. "Her features are perfectly elegant, and you could not ask for a disposition more befitting of a lady. She is sharp enough, even I can tell. I believe she'll strike a chord with you, Your Highness." But he trailed off. Beautiful, mild-mannered, and intelligent. In the face of all this, Tiered's reaction could only mean, what about her pedigree? Tiered's shoulders shook slightly. Bullseye, Wine thought. Just as Ninim assumed, the ambassador didn't have any connections to influential nobles, which meant he must have sniffed out some low-ranking aristocrat on the verge of ruin. In that case, it'd be easy to refuse her. Wine adopted a cool tone. "I know that I'm repeating myself, but I am a member of the royal family. I don't know this girl, but I can't accept anyone whose family lacks similar standing." Wine laid out a justifiable reason for refusal: social barriers. At this rate, his opponent would have no choice but withdraw. He felt confident in his victory, but Tiered spoke up just as Wine was watching the mental potato fade away from his mind. There's no problem with that, either." "Huh?" Wine blinked back. "Well, I should say that there is something about her status you should keep in mind." "What?" "If you're saying there's no problem, it's unlikely she's the daughter of a baron or viscount. Did you find a lady from the house of some famous earl?" Tiered remained silent. But Wine could tell it wasn't because he'd hit the nail on the head. Why won't he speak up? Wine finally realized something. Tiered wasn't uneasy from anxiety or impatience, but from not fulfilling the parameters assigned to him. It was the panic of a humble man who had reaped a harvest far larger than he could handle. Ambassador Talem. Could she have a ranking higher than the daughter of an earl? Yes. A marquis. Higher. A duke. One more above that. Wait, that would leave us with... Wine's cheek twitched and Tiered nodded. His voice was a mixture of nerves and trepidation. "Your Highness, the one interested in becoming your betrothed is our Earthworld Empire's second imperial princess, Her Royal Highness Lowell Mina Earthworld." From this sudden marriage proposal that had appeared out of the blue, a new sweltering wind arose in Natra, where the cold winter days loomed ahead. In time, this era would be known as the Great War of Kings. The curtains for the second act were about to rise on one key player, Wine Salima Arbalest.